Let's go to Stan in our radio booth with more. Stan?
Thanks, Ann. We're on the phone with Dan Barker. He's the head of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Mr. Barker, thanks for being with us. My first question to you is, who are the people who are in the Freedom from Religion Foundation?
Our members are freethinkers, which are atheists and agnostics. And when you use the word faith as a religious commitment, we don't fit in at all to that discussion. We think faith is an invalid tool or method of gaining knowledge. Most of our members, the atheists and agnostics in the world, prefer reason and kindness, basically, and reject authority, established belief, dogma, faith as a way of knowing.
Do you find that your organization and your members are being asked still to be included in more discussions, though?
It's only been until relatively recent times that atheists have even been invited to sit down at the table, have even been a part of the fabric of disagreement. So we see a silver lining in that it looks like right now secularists who are atheists and agnostics and non-religious are the fastest growing segment of our population. So it used to be 5%, 4 or 5% back in the 50s and 60s. Now it's 9 to 10% of Americans who are thoroughly secular, and 16 to 20% of Americans are thoroughly non-religious.
Why do you suppose that shift has occurred?
I think a healthier economy actually makes people need less religion, which is what happened in Europe. Most Europeans today are thoroughly secular because they're well off. Their society is fine, and they have this gorgeous empty churches over there that hardly anyone goes to. It looks like a similar thing is happening here on this continent.
Now, you were an evangelical minister before becoming the head of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Why the switch in belief?
The Bible is contradictory. The Bible is unscientific. The Bible has exaggerations. The Bible has historical anachronisms within it. The Bible itself is not a reliable document. Even though I used to preach that it was the Word of God, when you look at it closely, in context, and at the words, you find out that it really is not a book that any beliefs or facts can be based on. Yes, there's some truth in the Bible, obviously, but the overriding message in the basic story itself is not a reliable book. Any one of us could come up with a better system than that.
To go from one set of beliefs like that to another, that must have been a tough switch for you.
Yeah, it was painful. You know, it's ancient history now, but at the time it was a really agonizing process to go through. It took 4 or 5 years of reevaluation, and never imagining I'd end up as an atheist. After 19 years of preaching and 2 years as a missionary to Mexico, 8 years of cross-country evangelism and Christian songwriting. I'm still getting royalties, by the way.
Oh, wait, okay, now I have to know, what are you doing with the money that you're making off the Christian songwriting?
I put it to good use. It's not much anymore. It used to be back in the 70s and 80s, but now it's a few $100s a year, and I'll buy some good book on evolution or science or something. Or I might donate it to some good charity. Or I donate to our own group, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and other organizations that care primarily about this world and aren't so worried about whether there's some other world.
Dan Barker is the head of the Freedom from Religion Foundation based in Madison, Wisconsin. Mr. Barker, thanks so much for your time.
Well, thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun.
And back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks a lot, Stan. So this gives us a lot to talk about. Obviously, this was very controversial when we were talking about the ads that were on the buses in Bloomington. You can be good without God. This raised a lot of conversations and debate. Dennis, why don't we start with you? What do you think about this, what he called a rise in terms of the secular society within this country?
Well, I think he mentioned European Americans and the amount of money that's being tied to lifestyle and so forth, and empty churches. I can't speak to I can't speak to that. Speaking from the representative of the African American, Christian community, we see in our congregations not only those who are, very wealthy, but also those who are impoverished. And faith is a very strong part, actually a very much a connecting piece, not only to generations, but also the body of believers. And so this is a very interesting, to say the least, point of view, but one that's very very difficult to engage with because it's so far from what not only my belief system is, but the local church that I work with.
And when we're talking about the diversity of beliefs and things like that, Sue, why don't we go to you? I mean, do you see this as a rising belief system within our country or not?
It's an interesting question. For me, as a leader in the Jewish community, it's almost outside of what I work with every day, because being Jewish is more than just about a belief in God. Judaism is certainly founded on a belief in one God, but there's also an important aspect of community. And once you're born of traditionally, if you're born of a Jewish mother or you're raised as a Jew in some aspects of a Jewish father and raised as a Jew, you're considered to be Jewish. So saying that there are many people who consider themselves to be secular Jews because they identify with the Jewish community, but they may not be as committed to a belief in God, or they may be questioning what they believe in God, but that doesn't put them outside of the Jewish community. They're still part of the Jewish community because Judaism is much greater than just belief. It is, and Judaism as a religion is definitely founded on a belief in one God, so you can't take God out of Judaism, but it's a very different kind of conversation that we have. And so we actually do see a rise in the number of Jewish students involved here in campus, and the Jewish community is certainly not shrinking at this point, but I think part of that might be because there's more room for more people, as more Jews as part of the community, because we don't turn somebody away if they're questioning what their belief in God is.
Faiz, has this been a topic of conversation at the mosque or within your community here at IU about this debate?
About the people being secular?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Okay, so very similar to, I think, Jewish faith. Islam is also, it's a faith, and it has its own system, but also it's based on belief in God. So people who claim to be Muslims, of course, they are not saying that I'm secular or not. One thing, though, I noticed, I think in September, Richard Dawkins, who's the author of The God Delusion,
right,
came to IU, and in the last 4 years of being in IU, this is the first time I saw the auditorium, IU auditorium, was overflowing. People are waiting outside. And even in his book, he has also mentioned that in America, even though a lot of people say I'm religious, but this whole idea of being secular or questioning God or the existence of God is increasing. So if that one event is to say something, I think probably there are probably people who are questioning. And among the Muslim community, I'm quite sure people have, and I think in all faiths, people have question about God, existence of God, and so forth. But when somebody identifies themselves as a Muslim, then they're, of course, connecting themselves being as a part of the faith community. So it's some sort of a dichotomy in people's lives. I don't know exactly the answer how.
I don't think there is one. Let's go to Stan, who has a guest in the studio. Stan?
Thanks, Ann. I'm here with Candy Gunther Brown. She's a professor of religious studies at IU. Thanks for being here.
Certainly.
So as you were listening to Dan Barker speak just a minute ago, you were shaking your head that his numbers were incorrect. Tell us why you believe that is.
Well, it's not incorrect to say that 11 to 12% of Americans recently in surveys identify themselves as having no religion. But the problem is stopping there. What you need to do is ask, what do people mean when they identify as having no religion? And when you start to ask that question, what you find is that more than half of them pray, and that a bare 1/3 of them are actually atheists. And indeed, the percentage of atheists in the population hasn't actually increased over time at all. If you look at Gallup polls from 1944, the percent was 4. And if you look at some of the best national survey research done as of 2007, once again, the percentage is 4%. And so about 2/3 of those who identify as having no religion, what they're saying is they reject traditional religious beliefs, but they're highly supernaturalistic. And so belief in metaphysical phenomena, paranormal phenomena, these are all very, very high in the vast majority of those who identify as having no religion.
So I guess this begs the question, what is the defining factor for somebody who has religion or believes in religion? If someone comes to you and says, I believe in something or I have religion, what is the one question you ask them to try to assess whether they are correct in their own assessment of themselves?
Well, I mean, so this actually gets back to one of the commonly cited studies finding that people are identifying themselves as spiritual and maybe is not as religious. But with that, it's often seen as a dichotomy that either you're spiritual or you're religious. But actually, once again, about 57% of Americans identify themselves as both spiritual and religious, and only 10% are identifying themselves as just spiritual.
So it sounds like some of this is actually syntactic. It matters what word you're using to describe yourself, and it sounds like there might be a lot of people who aren't fully understanding what the scientists and the religious community mean with some of the definitions of each of these words.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and people are going to use those words and those statistics for their own agendas, whether or not they actually correlate with the facts. But if you look again at what are most people in the population saying, there is a lot of experience and kind of, or at least perceived experience of some kind of religious phenomena. And so some 2/3 of Americans will say that they've had some kind of experience such as hearing from God, or I feel like I've been called by God to do something. As many as 55% of Americans say that they believe a guardian angel has protected them. 44% say that God's called them to do something.
So quite a few.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get back to this in just a couple of minutes.